right. Hi, everybody, and welcome everyone to our event today, Muslim Women in the Digital Age, Podcasting, Illustration, and Music, with podcaster Misha Yusuf, illustrator Emmen Ahmed, and musicians Aina Freyd, featuring sisters Straingth and WiZdumb. My name is Aliyah Khan, and I'm the director of the Global Islamic Studies Center at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. We're your hosts today. I'm also an associate professor in the Department of English and the Department of Afro-American and African Studies here. First, a little about us and our events this year. The Global Islamic Studies Center aims to promote the understanding of global Islamic culture and Muslim societies worldwide, not just the Middle East, but Asia, Africa, and the Americas. If you're a student, faculty, staff, or community member who is interested in our talks, or film festivals, or research funding, please join our monthly newsletter to stay informed and attend our events. In addition, if you're an undergraduate student, please declare our Islamic Studies minor. The minor itself has no prerequisites and is 16 credits. You can find out more information on our minor page on our website, but please also reach out and contact us so we can make sure you have everything you need to declare. If you're interested in graduate programs, check out our Masters in International and Regional Studies with an Islamic Studies specialization. The application deadline is usually mid-December, and you can also find out more info on our website. The master's program is 36 credits total and is usually pursued over the course of 2 years. Again, please contact us for more information. We have several major events coming up this semester. In March, we'll be holding a multi-part film and speaker series on Black Islam in the Americas. We'll begin with a virtual screening of the film Two Gods, directed by Zishan Ali and Aman Ali. Community members will be able to access the film for viewing for 2 weeks. And at the end of that period, in mid-March, we'll host a Q&A session with the filmmakers. Later in March, we'll have a talkback with Dr. Suad Abdul Kabir, author of the book Muslim Cool, Race, Religion, and Hip Hop in the United States, and founder of the Black Muslim media site Sapelo Square, who will be talking about her work on the history of Black Islam in the Americas. In April, we'll be hosting a roundtable and book launch for the essay collection Mantle of Mercy, Islamic Chaplaincy in North America, which is the first such collaborative text on the growing field of Islamic chaplaincy in the US and Canada. The editor and some of the book contributors will be speaking on their experiences as Muslim chaplains and spiritual caregivers on university campuses, at hospitals, and in the wider Muslim community. So please stay tuned to our website and our newsletter for dates and speakers. Today's event is brought to you by the Global Islamic Studies Center at the University of Michigan. The event is co-sponsored by the Center for South Asian Studies, the Digital Islamic Studies Curriculum, the Arab and Muslim American Studies Program, the Department of American Culture, the Digital Studies Institute, the Office of Multi-Ethnic Student Affairs, the Institute for Research on Women and Gender, the Women and Gender Studies Department, the Center for World Performance Studies, the Stamp School of Art and Design, and our Southeast Michigan community partner, the Detroit Room Project. I'd now like to introduce and welcome our speakers today. They'll be thinking about the questions of how do Muslim women define themselves in the digital age? How do Muslim women experience the online world, and what role does the internet play in their creative work? How do race and religion intersect in Muslim digital communities? Our first speaker, Misha Yusuf, is a Pakistani-American writer, podcast host, and producer on a mission to make things that inspire awe. She is the founder and CEO of Dust Light Productions, and Adweek's 2019 Producer of the Year. She most recently hosted and executive produced the podcast Hello Nature by REI Co-op Studios and Dustlight, presented by Subaru. The show tells the history and present-day story of the American national parks through BIPOC voices, asking the question, since the parks are public, are they truly for everyone? Misha is also the creator and host of Tell Them I Am, presented by Higher Ground Audio and Spotify and produced by Dustlight. In Ramadan 2021, she hosted and executive produced season 2 of the podcast, which premiered exclusively in Rolling Stone. The series is about the small defining moments in our lives. The voices are all Muslim, the stories are universal. Our second speaker, Emmen Ahmed, is a first-generation Pakistani American whose work, as bright and playful as it seems, has a motive to show a fusion of Western nuances in South Asian American culture. By mixing elements of Asian and American popular media with traditional elements of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, she creates a relatable and wearable effort for identity. She draws influence from traditional Mughal miniature paintings, Islamic art, the female form and experience, and Bollywood imagery to narrate cultural flaws, identity markers, and assimilative experiences that South Asians, Muslims, and women have in the Western world. Although she is competent in traditional media such as graphite pencil and acrylic, she utilizes digital media for the majority of her current work, for its globalized gateway to hundreds of people across the world. Our third group of speakers, Aina Freyd, is a multi-talented girl band with twin sisters Straingth and WiZdumb, natives of Baltimore, Maryland, raised in Detroit, Michigan. This duo has been singing since they were 2 years old. The multi-talented artist group Aina Freyd are singers, songwriters, rappers, poets, and changemakers, to name just a few of their many attributes. Their mission is to inspire the world in goodness through their art in ways that will make people listen. After the speakers, we'll have about 15 minutes where they will respond to each other's talks and creative works, and then we'll invite audience questions. Please remember at that time to use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to send us your questions. And now I'll turn it over to Misha.
Leah, thank you so much for the generous introduction and for having me. I'm so excited to be among such great company with Aint Freyd and Emmen Ahmed. Thank you to the University of Michigan and the Global Islamic Studies Center as well, and all of the sponsors. And thank you to all of you who are at home or, I don't know, maybe driving in your car or in your bathroom, watching these presentations. I can't wait for your questions. So the thing that I am most inspired by in my digital life and in my life is vulnerability. I think as a Pakistani American immigrant Muslim woman, it is incredibly important to showcase the most authentic version of my life in my lived experience among among people IRL, but also in my digital life. And there are three main tenets of that. One is kind of a personal wrestling, which is who am I as a person? How am I showing up in the most honest and truthful way in the world, and doing what I believe to be the right thing, coming from a place of integrity at all times, showcasing that online as well. The second is wrestling spiritually and having honest questions, wondering out loud what it means to be not only human, but what it means to be Muslim in this world, and making space by showcasing my own experience for other people to share that vulnerability, that spiritual wrestling. And the third part of it is showing my womanhood and my Pakistaniness and my Muslimness through my digital life, and showing how those identities can be reconciled, and choosing which bits and pieces to share. So I'm going to talk about each one of those things. The most interesting way in which I have been able to wrestle with my existence as a human being and ask the questions of what it means to be human, what it means to be a good person, is through my project, Tell Them I Am. Tell Them I Am is a podcast. Season 1 came out with KPCC, the NPR affiliate station in Los Angeles, and it features small stories with a cast of all Muslims from all walks of life. Black Muslims, Arab Muslims, South Asian Muslims, Latino Muslims, young and old, queer and straight, Muslims who are extremely conservative in their thought process or have a more literal interpretation of the Quran. Muslims who are a lot more secular or cultural, or however they choose to define their relationship with Islam, is a little bit unconventional. And in Tell Them I Am, in season one of the things that I got to that I was lucky enough to do was share bits and pieces of my own life and share moments of vulnerability. So there was an episode where I talked about trying alcohol for the first time and how that is something that I wrestle with to this day. And I feel like having those kinds of moments and then allowing my guests to have those kinds of moments created a safe and open space for other people to be Muslim and to see that there's more than one way to be Muslim, which is ultimately the goal. I also think that it's a space where Muslim women most often are shamed or are ridiculed for being honest and unafraid in how they show up and in how authentically they show up. So because of my experiences with season one, because I was speaking so openly about all of these different ways in which I was wrestling with both being a good person and being honest and being a Muslim woman at the same time, I repeatedly would talk about being culturally Muslim. I would say that I'm not actually religious, that, I don't pray 5 times a day, I sometimes drink, I'm in a relationship with a non-Muslim person, therefore I must be culturally Muslim. And it felt like a really easy label to inhabit because it allowed me to reconcile my identity as a Muslim woman while also continuing to live the way that I actually live my life. Things that I had thought very deeply about and conclusions that I'd come to from a place of practice and my own integrity, but that wouldn't necessarily ascribe to traditional Islamic beliefs. By the time season 2 rolled around, I had grown up a bit. I had thought much more deeply about my experience with Islam and what kind of Muslim I actually am. And I started to realize that when I was saying I was culturally Muslim, I was actually kind of lying. And I was saying it because I was afraid that if I admitted that I am also spiritually Muslim, that I'm deeply inspired by Quranic philosophy, that Islam is an incredibly important part of my life that informs every single work of art that I make, and every decision that I make in my life, including how I use my money, then I would allow people to criticize me, that there would be, that vulnerability would be met with judgment. So I'm gonna play a short clip where at the beginning of season 2, I decided to take that vulnerability, that honesty, that spiritual and personal wrestling to another level. I will share my audio very quickly. Hi, it's Misha Yusuf. You may know me from the first season of Tell Them I Am, or the first episode of season 2 that you just listened to. So, you know how last season I kept saying I'm culturally Muslim? Well, that wasn't the whole story. I said that because it's easier for me to say I'm not Muslim or culturally Muslim than to defend the way in which I am Muslim. When I was 16, I picked up the Quran and I couldn't put it down. What I loved about it is that it isn't just a book of rules. It's a book of stories. Beautiful, messy stories about complicated characters who engage with the rules, examine them, even push back against them. I felt so connected to those characters and their struggles. I felt connected to the Quran. I felt Muslim. But I also felt like I was doing it all wrong. Because in my 16-year-old mind, there were only 2 versions of Islam. The white people version, where Islam is the stringent fucking desert religion that contributes to terrorism, and the brown people version, a competition of who can best follow this set of rules. And for me, it wasn't either of those things. It was like a treasure map to the divine order of the universe. But is that the right kind of Muslim? Am I religious?
If you asked me last year, I would have said I'm spiritual, but not religious. But like, what does that mean? Where's my spirituality coming from? Coachella? A bunch of astrology memes? I mean, I do love that stuff. But that's not a spiritual experience for me. For me, the spiritual experience is in the stories, the push and pull in the Quran, the nuance. And that guidance doesn't just stop with the stories inside the Quran. My relationship with Islam helps me learn from everything and the stories of everyone I meet. So, all this to say, I'm not just culturally Muslim, I am Muslim. And I hope that me saying it makes room for other people to say it too.
Great. So that is a little bit of the clip. You can listen to the rest of the episode in season 2 of Tell Them I Am if you go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And it features Nadia Hussain, who is one of the winners of the Great British Bake Off and a wonderful personality in and of her own right. But in doing that, in episode 2 of season 2, I wanted to create space for others who may not feel comfortable occupying that space as a Muslim woman, regardless of how they relate to their identity as a Muslim with Islam. And what that required of me was also using the platform of podcasting in kind of an unconventional way. So podcasting traditionally, you see investigative shows, you see scripted shows, you see some personal journal shows, but there isn't anything quite like Tell Them I Am, which uses, personal stories or religious interpretations and then blends them with the stories non-narrated or slightly narrated from the lives of guests, and then brings them to life through immersive sound. And I knew that it was incredibly important in order to spread that message and to take up the full amount of space that I wanted to take up as a Muslim woman, to bend the genre, to break the container of podcasting, and to use this platform to tell stories in a way that they had never been told before. And so if you continue listening to Tell Them I Am in this season, in season 2, there are a lot of different vignettes at the top of episodes where I take stories from the Quran. So for example, the story of Noah, or the story of Yunus, or the story of Yusuf, or Joseph, depending on how you like to refer to them, or which translations, if you're reading English or Arabic or whatever your mother tongue is. So all of these different stories, I decided to take them and to allow them to inform the beginnings of the episodes. And, there's a level of vulnerability in that too, because there's one level of vulnerability, which is sharing your personal life. And then there's another layer, which is sharing your interpretation of a religious text or your relationship to that, because that is also communal property, right? There's so many other people who have their own versions of that, who have teachings, who have scholarship that they ascribe to. And when you enter that arena and say, I deserve to take up space as a woman, as somebody who hasn't traditionally taken up this space, and you do it in the digital world, you also really open yourself up to feedback. So I was met with some really interesting feedback from platforms, really well-known, massive, audio institutions, and also from individuals. And I think that the thing that surprised me, and is incredibly hopeful, is that I was met with overwhelmingly positive feedback. There were a couple people who were like, put on a hijab or say assalamu alaikum before you start an episode of the podcast. But for the most part, people shared these really, really heartfelt messages and said that my ability, even though I was very different from them and my life experience was very different from them, the fact that I was able to share my experiences and my interpretations of the Quran gave them permission to do the same. And I feel like that is part of our obligation as Muslim women in the digital world, is to occupy that space and to have that open relationship, that back and forth with our audience, and other Muslims within our geographic region and beyond. And I think that's the really, really interesting part of existing in the digital world is that we not only have access to those who are around us, but those who are miles and miles away, who live completely different lives than us, or maybe oddly similar lives, but come from a totally different background. So, what this also inspired is a series called Quran Book Club. That has been something that I have driven a lot of spiritual fulfillment from. And that has been a place of joy and a spiritual sanctuary for me and many others. It's a series I started on Instagram during quarantine, the early days of quarantine. And in it, I read the Quran line by line with a different guest every episode, starting at the beginning, and our goal is to go all the way to the end. I read with Muslims, I read with non-Muslims. We've had some really, really well-known guests like Baratunde Thurston or Kay Flay. We've also had incredibly talented Muslims who are living different lives, are from all kinds of walks of life, many of whom have never, ever read the Quran, have never felt safe enough to read the Quran and interpret it based on their own reason and their life experience. And Quran Book Club for me has an opportunity to showcase that spiritual vulnerability and to occupy this space on a platform like Instagram that is notoriously known for algorithms that somehow magically, make it impossible for people to discover content about Palestine. Or that, only respond to photos of dogs or photos of you and your partner or whatever. Using that platform in this way has been incredibly liberating and has felt like a small act of revolution. And that is another place where occupying that space digitally has allowed me to build a relationship with other Muslims, to understand my own identity better through the digital community of Muslims, especially with Muslim women. And then the third way in which I feel like it has been incredibly important for me to occupy space in the digital world as a Muslim woman, but also has felt like, my obligation has been sharing bits and pieces of my personal life. So I feel like there are people who use Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all these different platforms, YouTube, entirely for work purposes. And I think for me, it is very much in line with how I want to live my life, how I make my art, what Tell Them I Am is like, or what Quran Book Club is like, is to share tidbits from my personal experience. So whether that is something I'm doing with my friends, or something that I'm doing with my parents, or having a cool trip or experience with my partner, I think it's important for the world to have to reconcile that I am both the person who is talking about the Quran in these spiritual spaces and in these intellectual spaces, and also the person who is a daughter and a sister and a partner who is living a normal life and has the same struggles that everyone else does. I think when we occupy space in that way, we force people to see the humanity in us, and despite having that open channel of communication, create a safety net around ourselves where we can showcase to them that we too are human. And even though we may be different from them, that we deserve to occupy that space in the real world and in the digital world. With that, I'm so excited for presentations from Aina Freyd and Emmen, and for all of your questions. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I think I'm next. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Emmen. I actually am a UMich alum for my master's. So I want to very kindly thank U of M for inviting me to speak today. Before I get started, let me pull up my presentation so that you can all see it. And so, yeah. So my name is Emmen. I'll be discussing what it's like for me as a Muslim illustrator, navigating social media and the digital space, talking about how Islam kind of helps me inform how I interact with social media. And it's not going to be so much how it informs my work, but more so how it helps me guide myself through the social media space. So I am considered a freelance illustrator and artist. But I think just a creative in general. I like to dabble in a lot of different things, which you'll see in a bit. A lot of common themes that you'll find in my work. I like to portray a lot of motifs of femininity and faith. I love doing portraiture. I love including patterns. I really love using the colors red and green. I love touching on like love and relationships, and I love displaying my subjects adorned with jewelry and clothes. And I also really like to take what I make digitally and try to experiment with other mediums. So like taking my work and making a blanket, or embroidering on clothes, or painting on mirrors, and just trying to diversify my portfolio just from my own creative like interests. And so here are a couple more examples of my work. You can see a lot of the Islamic influence. You can see a lot of the cultural influence. And you can see how much I use red and green. So me and social media, the history between that is I kind of grew up when social media was just beginning to emerge. And I started using it more in the middle of my high school experience. That's when I was really aware of how the internet could be used. And I've seen the many different changes it has had over time. Since back when, you know, websites were not super user friendly and Instagram was really heavily edited pictures of food. And shortly thereafter is when I saw the rise of how social media influencers could utilize platforms like YouTube and actually create a career or create some sort of entity where they could showcase their work or showcase what they're doing and kind of build a business from it. So with that, I mean, I would say that I was relatively late in the game posting my work online, especially after seeing how people could transform their business using social media and the internet in general. I kind of took it as a step towards, you know, diving in and seeing how I could utilize it for those purposes for myself. It definitely opened up a portal to a world of different opportunities. And I will say that most of those opportunities were actually self-determined goals that I finally had the confidence to go after. It's not, for me, it wasn't necessarily hitting a number goal and following or views or whatever. It was more so seeing like, what can I achieve next? What can I have now the confidence to, I don't know, say yes to somebody asking me to illustrate a book, or saying yes to Misha to illustrate, tell them I am. It was really just a challenge after challenge for me that I wanted to like achieve goals that I had set my mind to. And I would say now, the fact of the matter is like we rely on the internet. We can no longer function without it. We rely on our lives being built around our Wi-Fi connection and our phone chargers. And with this digital globalization, we are now more visible than ever. Whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a woman, whether you're queer, whether you're Black, like your visibility is now, you can use it as a tool, but it can also make it difficult for you to become vulnerable or for you to showcase your life. And this visibility itself really made me uneasy at first because it felt invasive, it felt unnatural. But I kind of really understand its power now. We can find connection in communities that can hit all of our intersections, but it also makes it more apparent that we are more vulnerable to harmful discourse. So with me and Islam and social media, I would say that, you know, Islam is a part of me. It's an extra limb. It'll naturally inform my work and the way I present myself to the digital world, but it also informs my patience and my activism and my appreciation for my creativity or the work that other people are putting out. With the harmful discourse that people become aware of once they start sharing more and more of themselves on social media, especially if you're trying to build a business or if you're trying to build an audience, you see that there is a lot of discourse on what is considered to be authentic posting. So I would say around my junior year of college is when I started seeing significant growth in my account. And that's when I reached a point in my relationship with social media where I was no longer in control. And Instagram was more so controlling me. There was too much self-worth attached to how well a post did, and there was too much pressure to continue to crank out work. Renowned artists took years to finish paintings. And you see nowadays people who are coaching others on how to grow their account. They're saying you should be posting multiple times a day to grow your audience. And I just thought to myself, like, how could it ever be sustainable for a creative online? I'm not saying I'm renowned, but I'm saying that your relation to your creative self deserves much more than the stress of posting multiple finished works in a week. So that's when I decided that I really had to restructure my relationship with the internet and try not to completely rely on its support as well. If my account was deleted today, would I even have enough outside support from my portfolio and my network to carry on? Creativity should not have been limited to the four corners of my phone screen, and it needed to be a more respected and fulfilling part of my life. And that's kind of how Islam, for me, wraps all into this. So, like, how does this relate to be me being Muslim, which is part of the big reason why we're all here. I would feel as though the nature of my work requires a lot of time online. And as mentioned before, that can foster a lot of insecurity. It can foster a lot of comparison between me and the next artist or illustrator or woman. And if Islam has taught me anything apart from the Shahada, is that I need to be thankful for what I have and focus on my own self-growth, just as we are supposed to be focusing on the growth of our Iman. Islam will always naturally inform my work and the way I present myself to the digital world. And I definitely believe that it has created a barrier that's an important barrier between myself and the challenges of social media. It really informs how I utilize it and how I present myself online. It helps me limit comparison, and it helps me be a lot more thankful for what I have. It also helps me be mindful of the content I consume and remembering that, it's important for you to be consuming content that uplifts you, that makes you have a positive outlook on life, that motivates you to get things done, that motivates you to go after your goals, instead of content that makes you feel small or makes you feel insignificant and makes you feel like you're just going to be continuously doom scrolling. So I would say, where do we go from here? It definitely is hard to be alive during a time where a lot of self-worth and value is placed on your online persona. If you're not known, then who are you? Our productivity, our usefulness, and our following can tell others a lot about you, but that depends on, the kind of people that you're talking to. At least in the industry that I'm in, I think that it's time to restructure that, because creativity should not really have a numerical value. I do find a lot of comfort in letting go of that pressure and realizing that people who are interested in your work will always be supportive. Being Muslim for me is not just about following ordained rules, but it's about finding balance. It serves as a conscious voice and helps me not take worldly things too seriously. I can be happy working at my own pace, but my work will give me a return because it's created out of authenticity and joy, and not just because it was created by a societal pressure to have a large following and online success. And I would say that the absence of wanting success oftentimes provided it anyways. So that's my presentation. You can find me on Instagram. There's my handle, Emmenjohn, and my website, emmenjohn.com. If you wanted to ask questions further down the line, connect with me, you can do so there. Thank you so much. And I will pass it off to Aina Freyd.
Hello, everyone.
Peace and love.
Thank you all so much for having us. We're excited to be here today.
Yes, indeed. To start us off, I'm Straingth.
And I am WiZdumb.
And together we are
Ain't Afraid.
It's so beautiful and honoring to go and follow after these beautifully talented women at this event.
Yes.
Before we hop in,
I'm so sorry. I got my wisdom teeth taken out Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I'm swollen. And I got a little bit of like a list going on. So hopefully she can reiterate anything I say, if anyone misses what I'm saying and stuff like that.
Yes, but to start us off, look at me. We are the multi-talented double dose of dopeness.
And we say this because we are very passionate about the arts. We love to sing, we rap, we make music, we compose music, but we also do spoken word poetry, and we also as well engage in some acting and playwriting.
On the stage, we can do.
Your girls got it. We are very passionate about those things. We call ourselves Aint Afraid because we are simply that, ain't afraid to be all of who we are, and we will definitely hop more into what that means. But one thing that should be said at this time as well is that Aint Afraid is bigger than ourselves. We call ourselves Aint Afraid, but we hope that through this, our movement is to allow others to feel their own Aint Afraid. How are you unapologetically showing up every day and choosing to live in your purpose, which we are absolutely passionate about. But before we hop into more of that nitty gritty concept kind of stuff, let's give you all a little background about who we are as people. So we grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. And I want to mention this because even though we were not raised there, we were raised most of our life in Michigan. It holds dear to our hearts because it is a place where our mother grew up and was raised, and she is very much a part of the reason we are the strong women we are today. But then it's also the place that we were born and where we got all of our first. So all of our first and earliest memories are in Baltimore. Our first school, our first homes, our first swimming lesson. So it means so much to us to always mention Baltimore where we can. But we did grow up in Michigan. We moved here when we were about 4 years old. And we lived all around the city. So one thing we're very open about is our struggle growing up as a poor family and living with a single mom for most of that time. While we did struggle financially and with the support of having family and other things, we had a joyous life. We grew up very happy because of the environment that our mother created for us.
And she taught us never to wear our struggle on our character.
Yes, so we definitely learned that from an early age, and then we didn't even feel the need to because of how beautiful life felt, how wonderful life was to us. And so that's what she kept us around. And I'm going to bring up charity at this time because it is important to note that our mother, even though we were the ones that needed the charity, she was always putting us in positions to be charitable. So at the masjids, we would drop $1 in the box. If we saw somebody homeless on the street or that was in need of some food, our mother used to keep snacks in the back of our vehicle that we could always give out to them. And it was always a wonderful, even when we were at stores, thrift shops, the toy aisle would always be a mess. And our mom would say, clean this up for them. And we'd be like, yo, like I had nothing to do with this mess. This is not for me. And she'd be like, go do it because that's what Muslims do. We Muslims make it a point to do good where they can.
Yes. And to move us into our next part, community work, that last point that you mentioned, how our mom taught us to clean up after others, even if it wasn't our mess, to be charitable. She taught us to do that very action in service. So yes, that's how we gave that.
So, it's okay. I'm trying to save you from talking too much.
Thank you.
In our young adolescence, this is our later teenage years, high schoolish, 15 years old, we got into working around the school first with some programs that engaged in the school community. When we did that, it led us to doing outside of school community work where we started to do things where we got to work with other young people, to talk to the young people in our community, to hear the issues and the concerns of them, and then present those concerns and issues to people like our representatives, government officials, our mayor and Congresswoman Debbie Dingle's phone numbers were in our phone at 16 years old because of the kind of work that we did. We did so much community work that we were able to receive an award called the Citizens of the Year Award, which was very wonderful. That award is awarded to people, only one person a year. And for the first year, and I think the only year so far, when we got it in 2017, they broke that rule to award it to us both, which was so wonderful. And that community work taught us how to apply our art.
Yes, because I don't know if you guys realize this, but
technically our first language was singing.
Yes.
That's our natural way of communication through the arts, rapping, singing poetry, what have you. So a lot of times when we were in these spaces and we were collecting data and doing research and speaking for those like us or communities that we were taught about, we found it easier to communicate these messages and these stories through the arts. So we would sing about something or have a playwright presentation or a spoken word performance, which was wonderful because sometimes it's not about what you say, but how you say it. And the way we learned when we learned how you say it, is such a powerful means of going about things. We were able to create real change in our communities, which is a topic for another day. But while we were in these spaces, on stages, constantly in our community, many people used to come to us and say, yo, like, why are you guys not on social media? Where's your YouTube? Why are you guys not reporting these things? And we were like, oh, snap. Like, this is having an impact bigger than we thought it would. We were just very fulfilled with the community work. But what we noticed was that people needed to see this on a broader lens. So we started our Instagram page. We started with our quick raps in the car, some singing pieces, some spoken word and poetry. And we were growing fast. And it was such a means to show us that, like, this was amazing. But then the pandemic happened and we realized a lot about ourselves. I'm sure a lot of people did as well. And we realized that we wanted to present ourselves in a better way. So we started to grow in ourselves and create a different kind of execution. So let's get into a different kind of execution. Yeah. We wanted to create solid pieces of work and art, which happens through our music. So we started to create our album and we created other singles and music videos that just happened last year in 2021. And we wanted to create quality work that represented ourselves. What we know we do on social media is show up as ourselves and create our own narrative and stories. It is important for us as Black Muslim women,
yes,
and the many people that we represent, for them to see themselves presented and work with quality.
Yes, so that they know we can do this and that we're worthy enough of this.
By we're, you mean us and whoever sees themselves
in us, in our message, in our appearance, in our story.
Quality doesn't just mean equipment and the type of work we produce,
right?
But it also means the message.
Yes, the message, which is why representing our vision and message is so important to us. A lot of what we talk about is how if you're not telling your story, somebody else is. And do you really want that? A lot of the world's history, you can see how terrible things have ended up because people think they know about others without talking to them or understanding them or trying to. And so this is just a tip for anyone watching. Tell your story, wherever it is, however it is, and don't worry about how many people see it. The people that are supposed to see it are going to see it. So we want to make sure that another thing we all strive to do is make sure that people see themselves in the Aina Freyd mission, but then also to tell a message that we feel people need to hear. Now, let me try to click next. Let me do. Okay. I think let's just, we're going to escape this real quick and just hop right in.
Yep.
So people are seeing the work that we're doing. We've been blessed to have opportunities like the one playing right now with the Dell commercial that you'll probably see us in all year. But then also we've been able to do things like get featured in Vogue Arabia for a story with other Muslim women in hip hop. And then the video that's playing now is the Samsung commercial that we're in. As you see us right there, cool with the glasses. You already know what it is. And we've also been featured in an up and coming, very fast growing Muslim magazine called Muslim Co. And it has just been very wonderful. These are just some of the accomplishments and some of the ways that we've been able to represent in media. We've also partnered with Amazon and Instagram. And the fact that our face has been able to be plastered for the entire world to see is amazing because these are the kind of things that we didn't have in media growing up. I can't remember a Muslim on TV or a Black Muslim woman on TV for that matter. And then if they were on TV, it wasn't about anything good. It was always about these stereotypes of people telling us what we're supposed to be.
Yeah. And a last thing I want to say is we're getting the attention of these big brands, but we're also getting the attention of big people. And what's beautiful to us is that means they're hearing people like us.
Yes. So we talk about what our reach is.
Our reach, a lot of people. So for us, we know that we connect with our Muslim brothers and sisters on many levels with our mission. But our mission is similar to the mission of Islam, which is the intention is to reach everyone. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what Aina Freyd is all about. It's about reaching everyone. And in doing so, we hope to represent Muslims all over the world. And a lot of our music touches on what we've been through and the values that we have, which are all stemmed through Islam. So our faith and our upbringing. Our faith and our upbringing, I would say as well to that. But yes, we are very grateful to have such a worldwide audience that is only growing, and it really starts with just telling your story. So if there's one thing you guys get from this, it is tell your story. I would like to touch on how when we first started social media, we found ourselves quickly boxed in because the people that were attracted to our work at first were Muslim audiences, and we found that our best performing work was our Islam related content. But then what we found was that we got quickly boxed into only being invited to Muslim events or only being relevant for Muslim topics. And it was such a different world than we were used to, because like we told you all, we come from community work, and what we actually find in community work is that we're typically the only hijabis or Muslims that are there telling our stories and our struggles and that are representing for an entire community. And one thing we have to say about that is Muslims need to get active. Muslims need to get more active outside of the Muslim community. Being active in the Muslim community is great, but then there's a bigger community outside of that where our kids go to school, where we shop at the grocery store, where new laws and city mandates come through because we're not having those conversations enough to realize how much they affect us. So that's just something I want to throw in there. But then also what we knew during the pandemic was that we needed to represent differently. We needed to come out in a way where we were controlling our narrative more. It's kind of like Emmen was saying, like where the audience wasn't controlling our narrative, but where we were controlling our narrative. So then we want to answer this question. What role does the internet and digital world play in our growth as artists? Were there good experiences, bad experiences, things we learned, and things we wished we knew? Well, there's no doubt we're not anything we are without the internet. We were artists before the internet, but the internet was able to get us on a global arena of the world, and it has been such a blessing to our career, and it's helped to shape our career and who we are as human beings. It's been many great experiences, many amazing things have happened. But have there been some challenges? Absolutely. I would say what we find as Black Muslim women is that we feel very regular as the people we have been our entire lives, but we find that many people see us as exotic beings or as people that are rare, and it can mean a lot of on the fence conversations where it's like, are you valuing me for what I bring to the table, which is a good amount of good? Or are you trying to just fill a quota? Right. Because a lot of people in the outside world who aren't in the Muslim realm see us as exotic, and in the Muslim realm they see us as rebellious. But we just see us as not all in the Muslim realm, but it can not all in the outside realm. But it can feel like that. Yeah, the majority of our experiences and our encounters. But we just feel like we're living in our purpose. Yes. And so so the barriers, I would say the bad experiences, we don't try to consider experiences bad, but some of the downsides are they try to prioritize our voice when it's hot, when it's Ramadan, when it's Eid, Muslim Women's Day, or when like this big national thing happens that involves the Muslim community. That's the only time they really Black community, exactly. That's the only time they want to include our voice at the table. In some places, not everywhere. Exactly. Like we said, we've seen a lot of open minds and great conversations and people trying to push good forward, but we do find these things that happen over the internet. We'll get comments of people feeling like we're misrepresenting Islam, or people that aren't Muslim and feeling like we need to go sit in the kitchen. I mean, people have literally commented like, aren't you supposed to be cooking in the kitchen or something? And it's just like, why is there ignorance? But then we've also had encounters of people who have come to us and they said, I had a limited mindset when I first saw you all, and I thought negative of you. And then when I saw your impact and your passion and the work that you do, I started to love what you all do. So it really goes to prove to us why we're doing what we're doing and only further empower our passion. Yeah. And it's wonderful. It really is wonderful to have these conversations. And lastly, I just want to say, the good experiences is connecting with all of you. Yes. And sharing our message and getting support from you all, and for us to get DMs or emails or texts saying, you all inspired me today, or you helped me get through this type of time. You helped me smile today. It's just so beautiful for us to impact others. And that's what we love to do with our music, is to empower others through the message of song, which is everyone's always listening to music. And we hope that everyone, after this conversation, I hope that it has been relayed clearly to live in your purpose, and know that your purpose won't purpose everyone. Your purpose won't benefit everyone, but it will benefit you, and it'll benefit somebody else. And that's enough. That's enough, and you're enough. Here, 10 seconds left on the clock. We did it. We did it. Hey, 10 seconds left on the clock, and we did not go over, and we're so happy. But yeah, we're ready to open the space up back to our fellow members.
Thank you so much to everyone for those wonderful presentations. And I think Aina Freyd, I don't think any of us would have minded if you went over. I think that would have been just fine with all of us and the audience. So I would first like to invite the panelists to speak with each other, to respond to each other's work, to respond to each other's presentations, for a few minutes, and then we will go to audience questions. However you'd like to do it.
I actually have a question for both Misha and Aina Freyd. When it comes to advocating for yourself in a professional space, working with big names and big companies, how do you advocate to tell them the Muslim voice is important to be heard? So, and pitching yourself, pitching the fact that the Muslim voice is meant to be heard, it's valuable to be heard.
Yeah. Okay. We like to, give space, take space. But for us, I think the biggest thing is it's how you show up in your own mission. So we try to show people we're just like you all. We care about the same causes like you all. We have the same issues. Whereas loving and vulnerable as you, we care about the same things. We have the same values, the loving family, loving the world, giving love. And so for us, when we come to the table to these conversations with people, I think we kind of teach them, you can prioritize my voice beyond just Muslim related topics because we can connect with one another. I think something else I say is give them all the ideas. Tell them everything that's on your mind. You gotta be bold. You have to be bold out here. You gotta be like, you know what? And while we're on this conversation, I'm thinking of a way we can partner here. I'm thinking of an idea we have over here. I'm seeing a future of this, and this. All they can do is say no. And if it's no, maybe it's no right now, or maybe it's let's have that conversation. Maybe it's I can connect you with such and such. Yeah, or maybe it's not you. Maybe you put a seed in their mind for them to invite somebody that looks like you for another time for another topic. But as long as we're pushing the narrative, like you can use a Muslim's voice in any topic, that's good enough for us. But then I also think another point to what you're saying about and I'm sorry, Misha, I'm gonna let you talk, girl. I'm so sorry. Another thing I think you're asking as well is like to tell them how do we convince people that the Muslim voice and Muslim issues matter? I think that we talk about like these are the people you're serving. Your customers are these people. Their cousin is this person. You never know who a Muslim is. We look like many different things. You never know. That the girl getting the cereal box in the middle of a store aisle is a Muslim. Because we're all out there and we're all ready. And let me just be quiet and let Misha talk.
No, I want to hear from you. I feel like to build off of that, part of my instinct is always to go when in doubt towards money. So I think that we're lucky to have a lot of numbers on the global and national Muslim audience. We know that there is 3.45 million or 345 million Muslims. It's 3.45 million because there's 200 million, whatever numbers it is, but it's 3.45 million Muslims in America, 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. And I believe we're at $170 billion in spending power in the US and almost $3 trillion in spending power globally, with young Muslims leading the charge. And that also skews female. So knowing that data, knowing that by 2050, 50% of the world's population is going to be Muslim, that we're the fastest growing religious population, all of that helps, in my case, make the case for why people should spend their dollars, and why they should not only invest in us as like, from a place of service, or because they want to tell or elevate like stories from people of color from like a good optics or PR perspective, but also because we're going to make them a lot of money. And I think at the end of the day, we're in a mostly capitalistic world, mostly capitalistic country. And being really, really frank about those numbers, even if people pretend like they're only in it for the good deed, will probably speak to something deep in their heart. So that's something I use to advocate for Muslim audiences.
I know, I love that, because some people speak money, some people speak numbers. They don't speak emotional, connection or empathy. So I really love that point. Right. Really, and then I'd also ask the same for you, if you have those experiences. How do you show up in that way?
So like personally, I haven't had much experience working with such big entities. But I will say, like, I feel like in my experience, it's more so wrapped up in you're gonna listen to my voice, and not necessarily, like, I'm not gonna advocate for the whole Muslim population, but you're gonna get my voice and my knowledge, or my experience, my like work experience, and also personal experience when working with me, and that's gonna inform what we're trying to achieve. And if people value that, then that's great. If not, then I mean, it's okay. Like, opportunities will come and will go. But based on what I have people I've interacted thus far, it's mostly just been putting my Muslim experience or my female experience into me, and selling me.
That's amazing. I think that talking about identity is very important. Like, going off of what Emmen just said and what Misha was covering earlier, when you talked about how you identified first culturally Muslim, and then your journey on to becoming just saying, like, I'm Muslim. That was very deep for me. I wrote a little note here as you said that. It was like, there it is. I got it. Because we're so outwardly, like, in our appearance Muslim, and then we also present very faith filled, like we're very fulfilled by our faith. People couldn't imagine that was the case beside our passion for the arts in the way that we present it. And so I feel like we encounter that a lot in our careers, people being confused by the fact that we could be so passionately Muslim and then also so passionately in the arts as we do. And I just wanted to know if you guys have the similar encounters and how you go about dealing with them.
Yeah, I want to add to that question, because I know I'll answer it, and then but I'll ask this question before I answer it for myself, because I'm just getting really excited. But I know, Emmen, you have struggled a little bit to with like retaining audiences in terms of like evolving your art, and I don't know how much of that had to do with like the Islam aspect of your art or the specific kinds of like artistic aesthetic that you were using. I think for me, I have noticed that like audiences come to my digital platforms, especially on social media, right? That those are not just the people who are like listening to the podcast once. Those are like people who are listening to my stuff and like want to kind of keep in touch with what I'm doing day to day, or like, know about when I'm speaking next or whatever. But I feel like my audiences come from so many different sources, because like I'm in the podcast industry. I've made shows about nature and about earthquakes and all these, Michelle and Barack Obama's podcast. So there are people who are coming for that content, who expect me to be a podcaster first. There are people who are coming in from the Quran Book Club lens. And I think with Quran Book Club, because the goal is to allow the guests to really lead the charge with the interpretations, and to really create a safe space with like no judgment, or where my interpretation is in no way superior to anybody else's. I think often people kind of assume one thing about like what kind of Muslim I am. And then the third place from which people come is as listeners and fans of Tell Them I Am. And so one of the most interesting things that just happened recently that I was like thinking about, I was like, wow, I didn't expect this to happen, was I posted a photo with my partner on Valentine's Day. And I noticed that it was the greatest drop off of followers I have ever had in a single day. And I was like, oh, I mean, I have no answers to this, but it made me really curious about which audiences were uncomfortable with that photo, to the degree where they were like, oh, you're not the person we thought you were, and so we're not going to follow you anymore. So I feel like there is, from all those different spaces, right? Some people expect me to be like the nature person. Some people expect me to be like this like Pakistani progressive Muslim woman. And then there are others who probably expect me to be like a spiritually wholesome, always perfect kind of human. Um, and yeah, I don't know how to wrestle with that and how to retain audience while doing that. I think what Emmen said about a level of detachment is probably key, you know, and the willingness to walk away from all of this at any point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on some level. Like it is difficult to figure out like how to serve your audience, but I think the way I kind of when I noticed that, you know, after I shifted the way I was illustrating to fulfill some sort of personal satisfaction, because what I was making before I just no longer identified with, and seeing the a lesser amount of engagement or a lesser interest is disheartening at first. But then you come to realize, like, I don't have to have an online persona that is trying to appease an audience. You show up as you, and you are all of these different things. And people who understand that you are showing up as you and you have all of these different things are going to stick around and see your journey through the end.
How do you all wrestle with that?
Oh, well, I find that one thing about us is this is not a new conversation for us, and it's not. I remember going to Dearborn schools where we were the only Black kids, full around all, you know, people from all different kinds of Middle Eastern backgrounds. Yeah. Thank you for the word. Yeah, yeah. And people just immediately, how are you guys Muslim? You're not Muslim. Why are you guys wearing the hijab? No way. Your mother's a convert? People
as if Islam is reserved to one nation.
One kind of ethnicity or race.
So we've always had to just be like, I don't care. Like I don't care about what you have to say. So for us, we share our I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
We share our art so that people can benefit. But if you don't benefit, I honestly don't care.
Like, that's on you. I'm here only to give goodness, and if you just can't seem to receive
then
it,
it's not for you.
Then it's not for you at that time, and I'm okay with that.
But I would say this: I think that
the point I was trying to get at, I think the point you were going,
you know, what I'm saying, I don't care.
The point I was trying to get at is that we have been advocates for our differing identities our entire lives. So when we stepped into the music world, it wasn't something we were unfamiliar with advocating for, but it was something we were desensitized to feeling sensitive about. Like I didn't care to get in my feelings, or I wasn't thrown off by the ignorance. And I've done what we did what we always do. We took it as an opportunity for growth and to build more understanding. If there's one more question I can get in real quick, because Emmen, I saw in your presentation this one illustration that intrigued me, and then I also see that you have it hanging on your wall. It's like a figure of what looks like a woman. No, it's like a figure. It's like a figure of what looks like a woman, and then I think there's a fruit on the face. Can you explain that one?
Okay, yeah. So it's like this one and this one too. So I had this phase where I was looking at a lot of like traditional, well-known American or European art. So like, you know, Renaissance portraiture, a lot of like, I don't know, like famous paintings that you would learn in art class. And I was thinking about like how does my identity or like my experience, like how can I apply it to this? And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with this really, it's like it's famous, but it's also like kind of nuanced. This painting of like a man with the top hat, and he has like an apple in front of his face. And it's like a green apple. And I was like, oh, like so a lot of the times, a lot of my ideas was like, this would be cool if it was like this. So when I have an idea like that, I just wanted to make it. So that's kind of like the story behind that. Just like, oh, this would be cool if it was like this, or this would be cool if it had like a different color. And you take that idea and you put it to, not pen to paper, but that one. You taking the idea and putting it, in my case, like iPencil to iPad, and seeing how it plays out.
I have two questions to get us started with the audience questions, and And maybe you all have some things that you still want to say to each other. First question is for Emin and Misha. I think I'd like to hear, and I think we'd all like to hear about how you met and how you began collaborating. And then secondly, to all of you, so Ain't Afraid, one of the most important things you said was about controlling your own narrative. So I'd like it if all three of you would respond to that issue and that idea of how important it is for you to control your own narratives and how you do that.
So Emin and I met when I was working on season 1 of Tell Them I Am. So I created and pitched the idea at KPCC, the public radio station in Pasadena. And we were looking to have an illustrator do illustrations that we could then share on Instagram, because we knew the podcast would likely reach a younger audience than the public radio station's traditional audience, which is very white and very old. And there were a few different people who were in the mix. And my boss at the time, now creative director at my production company, Arwen Nix, was a follower of Emmen's. She had been following Emmen since, I believe, Emmen, you either did Riz Ahmed or Kamel's illustration. I think it was the Kamel one that she saw on Kamel's page. That was shared pretty widely. And she was like, oh, I really like the work that this woman is doing. She happens to be Pakistani, is likely Muslim or has some sort of relationship to Islam. And I saw Emmen's work and I was like, oh yeah, like no questions. This is definitely the person that we're going to work with. And then I reached out. I don't know, Emmen, if you want to share your side of it.
I mean, yeah, once upon a time, it was an email in my inbox from Misha. And when she pitched the show pretty well, where I was immediately like yes. Because I think, I mean, even in the work that I do now, I work for the Islamic Scholarship Fund. It's all about, showcasing Muslim voices and making like the whole, if you're not telling your story, someone else is, it's making sure that our stories are being heard in major sections of the US industry, like media and film and etc. So having an anthology series like Tell Them I Am, where you're just kind of diving into people's lives for a couple minutes of your day, it really spoke to me, and I was like, obviously yes. And from like here on out, every single time I work with Misha, it's been a great experience. So it's like an automatic yes every time there's an idea pitched, or every time that she has an idea for something else that she wants to do. I think the way that she's advocating to have our voices put on a megaphone is like, it's great. It's really great.
I also feel like, Emmen, you've always like expanded on whatever creative vision I've like collaboratively. It's felt like such a trusting relationship. Partly because I think having that shared experience of being Muslim women and having like our Pakistani culture in common as well creates kind of an unspoken language. And I think it's one of the things that I've realized after working with Emmen is increasingly important to me, is making sure not only that whenever projects have to do with Muslims or with women or whatever identities we're wrestling with, that the team that actually gets to tell those stories visually, in audio, in any medium, is representative of that, and that the money that is being spent in making that is going to people who can accurately uplift and take that vision to another level. And I feel like, Emmen, you've always, like, even in season 2, I think I came to you and I was like, what do you want to do? And you had the idea of putting people on the bus, which like to me had such an automatic resonance from this like Islamic and Abrahamic story of like the smashing of the idols that every prophet goes through, and like the idolization of people. And it just fits so well with what we were doing with season 2. And I think that like, if we had not had the trust where you could just, do what you wanted, and I knew that it was going to elevate the vision, I don't know if that would have been possible.
No, I'm good.
Okay. To answer the question about controlling narratives, it is a huge thing for us, like we touched on a little earlier, because we feel like we've had to advocate for our narrative our entire lives. I think there was a point in time, not when I was here, because I was like 2, but there was a point in time where only media was controlling the narratives and the stories of the world. But since then, thank you God, there's social media, and we have the abilities to create platforms and to create communities of people where we get to preach messages and connect with others that feel the same. And so I feel like there's not an excuse for anyone to feel, not an excuse. I feel like, let me reword this, because there's a lot of space for people to control their own narrative. And there's a lot of space for people to hold space for themselves and others in a way that they feel is the best way to go about things.
And if I can touch on the second part of the question, how do you go about doing that? In our music, we always tell people, if you want to know about me, hear what I have to say, listen to my music. We touch on women's rights, using your voice, mental health, systemic racism, social issues. Like and then also our experiences. So there's space for people to hear our voice. Like for us, it's we always say, to control your narrative, you need to put yourself in the power position. You know, we're nothing, right, the leader. And what we love about the arts is, see, like on stage, you can't shut me up.
Yeah. This is my mic.
When my song is playing, I mean, you can pause it, but what I have to say is still there.
Yeah.
You can't revise what I said. You can't twist it or change it. What I said is what I said. And so the arts for us is a really good way in controlling our narrative.
To expand on that, I think we're living in a time where it's so interesting to see how media is decentralized. We're no longer simply relying on newspapers or like the 7 o'clock news. We are getting our experiences from actual people throughout platforms like TikTok or Instagram or Twitter. And so I think it's really important for us to take advantage of that, in a positive way, and making sure that we are, we're taking this opportunity to really start screaming what we are and who we're about, instead of waiting for someone to, interview you, or someone else to talk about it on TV, and they're not even going to really get it right. So yeah, I think this whole decentralized news and media period that we're in is it's really going to help, spread stories on a global scale in a more authentic light.
I think for me, it's always been about how do we tell our stories in the affirmative rather than from a place of defensiveness. Because of 9/11 and gross misinterpretations of Islam that have been, perpetuated by bigoted or Islamophobic people, I think there is this idea that we are on the defensive. And yes, we are on the defensive because most people perceive us as hateful or as terrorists or as dangerous in some way. But I think some of that is also state of mind in terms of how we approach telling our own stories. I think we get to choose whether we're responding to those attacks or whether we just ignore them and tell our stories in the affirmative. So for me, there are two things that I have done in order to create space for myself and others to tell our stories in the affirmative. One is, starting my own production company and actually literally controlling the means of production. Whether that comes down to the legal contracts or the money or the teams that are assembled to tell these stories. And then the other part of it is in actively sharing my interpretation of Islam and my own personal experience of my life. Because I think if I don't do that and I don't occupy that space, then other people will continue to define only, a handful of different ways in which Muslims can live their lives or in which Islam can be interpreted as a philosophy. So I think that, continuing to kind of take control by flooding the affirmative rather than responding in the defensive is the most effective way for me.
Thank you for your responses. It's really striking how for all of you, it has to be an ongoing thing, continual ongoing thing. We have quite a lot of questions for you, so let's see how many of them we can get through. The first set of questions is from Dr. Carla Millett, who is the chair of the Middle East Studies Department here. She says, thank you all for those inspiring presentations. Your energy is so powerful, and I love that you all talked about obstacles you have overcome to get where you are. For Aina Freyd, I literally feel less afraid than I did before I heard your message. There are two questions here. The first one is for Misha. Will you do Tell Them I Am in 2022? And we also had another question for someone else that's the same thing, from Tanyin Sheikh. Will there be a season 3 of Tell Them I Am? And then for all of you, do you think that the non-Muslim public is more receptive to American Muslim voices in the cultural sphere now than it was in the past?
So the Tell Them I Am question is pretty quick. Thank you for asking that. I've been getting that question a lot lately. There will not be a season 3 of the podcast Tell Them I Am at all. Most likely ever, but never say never. I believe that the podcast kind of ended at a place where where the integrity of the story is intact. And I think that unless I find a real purpose and mission in making a season 3 that takes the show to the next level or does something that we've never done before with season 1 or 2, that most likely won't happen. But there will be other iterations of Tell Them I Am. So there will be a TV show, and there will be a series of books, a children's book, an anthology, and a workbook coming out of the show. And I will share more information about that, hopefully tied to Ramzan in the future. And then the second question was around, sorry, I'm trying to pull it back up.
I can tell you. Do you think that the non-Muslim public is more receptive to American Muslim voices in the cultural sphere now than it was in the past?
No, I don't. I don't, and that sounds really dismal and sad, but I think that we still have far too many people in leadership positions in very powerful platforms, at least in the media space, who honestly just either do not have an understanding of Islam and the Muslim population, or themselves are not from a background where they can empathize with the immigrant or other religious experiences. And so I think that the most important task that we face as we gain more notoriety or power or fame or money or get into leadership positions ourselves is to open the door for other Muslims and to make sure that that representation piece is constantly something that we are mindful of, because until there is true representation in Muslims in leadership positions, I don't think that there will be the kind of receptiveness where all of us can tell our stories without being met with very racist tropes or having to fight really, really hard to overcome the pervasive idea of Muslims.
Mm-hmm. And then what about the rest of you in answer to that question?
I think I agree that you're the audience that I don't think non-Muslims are as receptive as we'd hope them to be, but I also think it really depends on the message too. I heard a long time ago, and I still think it is true now, that when we're talking about, majority Muslims are peaceful, we believe in this, this, and this, they probably won't believe you. You come with them with statistics, you come with them with numbers in terms of Islamic representation in the US, and they're not going to be really met with openness to that. I think it's more so you show up and you be a good Muslim or just a good person in general, and you show that that's a reflection of your faith and that's a reflection of Islam in general, then I feel like their hearts will soften to that message more so than you just coming at them in the defensive and saying, no, we're this, we're not that, we're not that.
We were fighting about who's going to answer first. Not fighting, but you get what I mean. Yeah. The world is, I would say it's being a little bit more receptive, especially to the power of social media. But there's still so much work to do. Mm-hmm. But I'm reminded of a story of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He was walking with an older man. And he was telling the older man, let me carry your bags during your journey so that you don't have to. And the whole trip, he was talking. The older man was talking badly about Muslims and about the Prophet. And the Prophet was just listening.
And he didn't know that.
And then at the end, he didn't know that it was actually the Prophet who was actually helping him with his bag, who stopped what he was doing to help this older man. And in that instance, the older man was like, wait, this is what a Muslim is? And so
we carry, me and Zakiyyah, Strength and Wisdom, we we carry that same understanding that sometimes you can't talk at people, you just gotta show them. You just gotta be yourself and show them.
A lot of the times what we found is in our community spaces, people say, you know, I don't know people like you, that this passionate and this caring about others and their lives, and we tell them, you know, and you know, they'll comment on our character, and I'm just gonna leave that for those private conversations. But you know, you say, if you love us, then you love my religion, you love me, and you love my mother. Because we think that there's so much, and I say my mother because there are so many ideas about what poor kids should grow up to be like, or what Muslim kids should grow up to be like,
single parent household,
or what single parent household children, Muslim children should grow up to be like. And when we just leave our characters and our missions and our stories and our passions to speak for themselves, they're very beautiful things can be drawn from them. And then I also want to comment on what Misha was saying. I think Misha is very right about how leadership needs to step up on how they show up, because I think that non-Muslims are receptive. I think that non-Muslims are open-minded, especially this young TikTok generation. Like, we're learning about different kinds of people all over the world, and people are actually intrigued. I think what it is that our leadership and the things that control big media, they're controlling what is most relevant. And so we're seeing small changes, but they will be big someday. And I'm so excited to watch it all happen. You know, like I'm in the store all my life. I'm in the store and somebody's like, "Can I ask you a question? Are you a Muslim? Are you hot in that? What's Islam about?" Da-da-da. And I'm like, I see that people actually
want to know.
They want to know. They want to know. We just have to give them the space.
Thank you for those answers. We actually so we have another question for Aina Freyd. You mentioned the collaborations you've done and you have upcoming with large companies like Dell. In projects like these, do you have creative control over your message and representation? And how do you manage to maintain your own narrative when dealing with this kind of company?
We've been very fortunate to work with people that are very open-minded and educated and willing to learn more about us. So specifically to maybe I shouldn't talk specifically, but I will say India. No, but I will say that we have been blessed to work with teams of people that want to know our favorite colors. They want to create sets that are representative of who we are, and they ask for reference photos, for style input.
In the Dell shoot, even though like we have a small part of it, they asked us, give us an idea of the space you're used to working in so that when you're on set, you're most comfortable.
Yes.
And so, like you said, we're very fortunate, and you'll see if you're ever blessed to work in this type of a field, that a lot of people are educating themselves, and a lot of people
at least the people we hang around.
Yeah, at least the people we like are working with. They put themselves in a position to not just make us comfortable, but to make the workers comfortable, but to make their staff comfortable.
Oddly enough, our more uncomfortable situations have come from places we felt we should have been the most comfortable. And that's all I'm gonna say. I'll talk about it in a later time, but that's tea.
I think we wouldn't mind if you talked about it now. You want to say more?
I would say specifically to my Muslim community. Sometimes
if that was what you were
yeah. Sometimes we are our worst critic. Sometimes we're doing the most damage. And I'm not saying in all places. We've had many amazing and beautiful experiences when we've worked with our Muslim community, but there have been some things that have happened that is just like we have to. Our broader community needs to educate themselves.
Even our Black community, like we were heavily involved with the NAACP some years back. And I'm not going to give no.
Okay.
I'm just saying, but the limited thinking of what a Black person looks like, or what a black person values,
or what a Black experience is like, is very.
Yeah, I think it's like we need to grow.
Yeah,
expand our minds.
Yes,
and so the places where we felt we would get the most
support is where we got the most
pushback.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Misha, we have two related questions for you. The first from Mateen Manek. How did you decide that a podcast would be the direction you wanted to present Tell Them I Am? And were there other mediums you considered? And then someone asking a related question about how, what is the story behind the title of your podcast?
So I thank you for asking those questions. I started out in podcasting. So I've always been interested in radio, and I consider myself a writer and podcast producer and host first. So whatever project I make is usually something that I feel like fits within those mediums. So either writing like text writing or writing for podcasts or like in audio. So it was natural for me to be thinking of ideas that fit within that. So it was more that I was thinking of shows for podcasts and less that I was thinking of the premise of Tell Them I Am. And then once the premise of Tell Them I Am was fleshed out, it just felt audio native. A question that I ask all the time is like, what makes this perfect for podcasting and no other medium? And I think that if discrimination is the obstacle that we're dealing with, right, where like people see somebody, they automatically assume something about you. But if they hear your voice, it's a lot harder to tell what you look like. And all those visual assumptions that you would otherwise have kind of dissipate, or at least there are less of them. So that's the major reason where it felt really natural to lead with the voice. Obviously, that was supplemented with Emmen's illustrations, and people can always Google who's talking. And often people would describe themselves, but the first entryway was auditory and not visual. So it kind of was an antidote to discrimination immediately. And then the second question was, sorry, I am having a hard time keeping track of the.
It was the title of your
title.
Yeah.
So I actually talk about the title in the foreword of season 1. So it's an episode titled Misha, and it's the very first one. It comes from a story in the Quran and in the Bible and the Old Testament. And it's when Moses sees God in the form of a burning bush and talks to God. And God says, go and save your people, the Jews of Egypt at the time. And Moses asks, who should I say sent me? Because Moses is kind of like, what is happening? This bush is talking to me. Like, who is sending me? Why am I even listening to you? And God responds not with a name, but with Yahweh, which is a phrase, which says, tell them, I am. And more directly translated, I am, I was, I will be. And I was really struck by that story, that God refuses to name himself or give any specific attributes or container within which he can be defined. And I'm just using the pronoun he for ease. But I was like, okay, if God is refusing to be typecast, if God says, that he wants to transcend category, and our aim as human beings is to always aspire to godliness, to embody and espouse as many attributes of God as possible, then shouldn't we also aspire to transcend category and give others the space to do so without judgment? So that felt like it captured the entire struggle of being an American Muslim today and frankly being a person. And it felt like the most fitting title.
Thank you for that. We have a question for Emmen. When did you begin drawing? Who's your inspiration, and do you have a favorite art piece of your own?
Well, I've always been drawing my entire life. Like I loved getting crayons as gifts and stuff like that. And I always took like art electives in high school, middle school, etc. And it's always been a part of my life. And when I took it to the next level by trying to share it with the world, it came with a challenge of, how do I keep it as something that I always want to do? And how does it not become like a chore to do? How do I keep the control of my passion for it? In terms of like inspiration, I feel like a lot of creatives are always hit with this question. And for me, my answer always changes, but I've kind of accepted that my answer will be everything, and everyone serves as an inspiration to what I do. Ideas will hit me at the weirdest times, and sometimes they won't come to me when I'm actively trying to think of something. And a lot of the times that those ideas come when you least expect them is when I'm doing something that I never thought would actually inform my work until it does. And then in terms of a favorite piece that I've done, that's also hard because my attitudes towards my artwork changes so often. I mean, I will say like the ones behind me, I guess you can tell are the ones that I'm kind of more proud of. But I feel as though like each piece is kind of like a kid, like you love to hate them and you hate to love them. And I feel like I don't know, they all just serve as kind of like a timestamp of who I was at the time that I made it. And I can look back and say like I didn't like myself at that point, or I can look back and say like I learned a lot from that experience. Maybe I'll take some of that with me in the future, maybe I won't.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have a question for everyone, so you can just take turns. And I think this is one that our audience will be really interested in too. Were there Muslim women in the media or online that you all looked up to that helped inspire you each to grow in your talents, or did you feel like you had to pave the path for yourselves?
I'm gonna just take this head on.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Well,
That's
first,
it's okay. Yeah, real quick. Sakinah wants me to clean up for her that when she brought up the NAACP, it had nothing to do with the NAACP, but a situation that happened with someone in that space, if that makes sense.
Who was not a part of the organization.
Yes. Okay. So we got that cleaned up. But then,
and real quick, I'm gonna stop talking, y'all. My mouth is just
yes. Back to the wisdom tooth thing. She's having pain over there, but yes, absolutely not. Which is so sad to say, but a lot of people feel like I know there are some other Muslim female musicians, and some people feel like we've drawn inspiration from them. And I can tell you with a sincere heart, I didn't know about any of these women until I got into the game myself. On social media, I'm not going to bring up names, but I had no clue who these women were. And I have a lot of love for them in their art now, but it's like, we're not out there. And growing up, especially, had no idea. I honestly was, our mother was our inspiration. Our mother is the Muslim woman that we drew inspiration from. But outside of that, nowhere else.
I don't think I have one either. And it's mostly just because like I don't like to idolize people, and I don't like to put people on a pedestal. I kind of want to see everyone, whether they are more successful or least successful than me, as a peer. And so I feel like everyone can exist, can coexist and do what they want to do and draw inspiration from each other. But I think when you focus on yourself and you focus on your growth and the things that you want to do, then I mean your work will speak for itself.
I will echo what Emmen said. I think growing up, my parents very much taught me that nobody should be put on a pedestal, and that that's a core Islamic value. So definitely had a hard time having quote unquote heroes, whether women or Muslim or non-Muslim or whatever. Obviously, there are things that people have done and the ways they've lived their lives that I really, really admire. I would say none or very few of them happen to be Muslim women like Aina Freyd shared. And I think that's the exact reason why maybe all of us have decided to tell our own stories using our different mediums, is because we didn't see ourselves in the nuances of who we are. And I think that that's also something I would say to others, is that if you don't see someone who's exactly like you, which frankly is impossible, right? We're all kind of a unique manifestation of God on earth. So then your goal is to continue to tell your story so that others can see as much in common with you and feel empowered to then share their version of like how they exist in the world.
Mm-hmm. You know, that actually makes me wonder. Let me ask you a related question. What do you feel like your relationship is to historical Muslim women, the kind of women that Muslims valorize, right? And pay a lot of reverence to, for example, Aisha, Khadija, maybe even the Sufi saint Rabia of Basra. Do you feel like more kinship to those women, or do you look to them in some kind of way?
Now, this is an amazing question, because the last one was amazing too. It's just, I feel like I have a lot more to say with this one. Growing up, we learned a lot about figures in our religion. And we learned about the 5 perfect women: Asiya, Fatima, Maryam, Khadija, and Fatima. No,
She just said it.
no, there's 5. What was there 4? It's 4. It's 4.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, these are the 5, the perfect women, right? And then we learn about the mothers of the believers, and we learn about the wonderful Sahab. I'm not gonna get the Arabic right. I just know it. But the women at the time of the prophet, right? And those are the women we do draw a lot of inspiration from. The strength of these women to show up in the ways that they did, and to have such vocal opinions in their spaces, and to be so faithful and strong about who they were. That is where we draw a lot of inspiration. It really gives us confidence in being who we are. To be, people try to be, Muslim women are supposed to be quiet. Muslim women, have you not
read about the women
in Islam? Do you not know about Muslim women? I mean, a Muslim woman will tell you off if she needs to. Like, we are empowered. And so yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I think y'all understand what I'm saying. Like, it's so beautiful how empowered we are in our faith.
Yeah, I think they summed it up pretty well. I completely agree. Like I think nowadays you are almost expected to not be so vocal, but in the history of Islam and in Islam itself, like, we have a lot more power and a lot more say than what a lot of people think.
Controversial opinion here, but I would say I don't think that I actually resonate that much with historical Muslim women either, and not because those women aren't incredible, because I think the version of Islam that I grew up with in Pakistan, where I was raised until I was almost 12, and even in the US, among the Muslim community that I was raised with in Los Angeles, I think the emphasis was always on the men, on the male prophets and the companions of the prophet who were men, and women were seen, even in their like power and ability to stand up for their own rights, or having more rights than women have historically had up until that point, as accessories to the male messengers. So Maryam being, the mother of Jesus or of Isa, Khadija or Fatima or whoever else being the wives of the prophet. So they're always in relation to a male messenger. And I think that that's something that I've had a really hard time reconciling, because I think often the Quran is speaking to all of us, Muslims or non-Muslims, whoever is reading it, as a messenger on earth, in and of ourselves. And I think that includes women. So my hope and goal is to occupy that space, and for other Muslim women to occupy that space as unique beings, and not necessarily in relation to men at this time when we can.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate the constellation of answers there. 2 related questions for Misha. Someone would like to know what your preferred translation or translations of the Quran are, and what's the most important thing you learned during your Quran series?
So my preferred translations, there's a few of them. I think nobody should read only one, because then there's no fun in it. And also it's cool to see how they disagree or like complement each other. I really like the Thomas Cleary translation, and I like the Study Quran the most. I also recommend people get the Lela Bakhtiar Quran, which is one of the few translated by women that also interprets the Quran in a slightly more feminist light, or purposefully feminist light, which it's already inherently pretty feminist. And then the most interesting or valuable thing that I learned in reading the Quran is that everyone should read it for themselves. And the Quran, the first revelation to the prophet was to read. And so I think that that's something that I feel deeply attached to. And I feel like the Quran constantly encourages believers to seek knowledge. So I think that's the most interesting and important thing that I learned that I want to keep spreading.
That's great, right? Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Yeah. Aina Freyd, for you, someone asked, I found your work on TikTok and was instantly obsessed. Your representation as Black Muslim women means so much. Do you have a favorite of your own songs or work? Did you study choreography? And your dancing is incredible.
Thank you so much. That comment made my day. As far as choreography goes, we have not studied choreography. I think we just have a passion for it. We still feel pretty new to it. So that's really
I will say, as natural as singing was for us growing up, especially for me, dancing was like right there. Like I would always be dancing.
Mm-hmm. So we want to learn more about how to safely do things. I think we're just like, do this, and it's like, girl, you about to break the neck.
Yeah.
But it's we had the opportunity with our latest song, Always There, which dropped 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We actually, for our music video, we got to work with a choreographer, and that was the first time I really got to understand dance in its more technical sense, which was so beautiful to recognize that literally each step is intentional. Like each step was created. I want to turn around, but there's a way. Like there's a way to turn around. There's like 5 steps to get you to that point. Yeah, and I think it was just very beautiful. As far as our favorite song,
we love our music, man. Not to be cocky.
No cocky stuff, but like
I love everything I make.
Yeah, I think that every song has a message. Every song has its reasons. And for that, in personal space in our hearts. And for that, everyone will hold dear to us. I will say I can highlight what I feel like is beautiful about some of our songs. I think that our biggest song, most known song is LBP. And that specifically comes from a place of us empowering women ourselves. And just talking directly to some of the experiences that we have. That ain't never been me. Like talking about how like it goes right into our biggest message. You got a narrative for me, but boo, that ain't never been me. I will also say We Will Breathe, which is a song with a huge message about, you know, our Black community. And it came out at a time where that's actually a song that we performed on TikTok, and we were never going to record it, but it got so much love up there. We were like, wow, like this message is meant for generations to come. It was
inspired by many events, many tragedies like the killing of George Floyd and other Black people. And so therefore we were inspired, like it just kind of, like
it came right out.
Our first, our natural way of communication was through song.
If we don't have the words, a song does. Trust me.
Our song does.
So it's stuff like that. Every song has a message. And some of them have been able to transcend beyond our wildest dreams. So we're excited to see it keep happening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have a question that is for everyone. And this person asks, as a Muslim student in the middle of my undergrad, is there any advice you can give us women on how we can follow in your footsteps, things we should do, things to avoid, lessons learned?
I guess this is like I want to hate myself, but you know, like just do it. If I didn't just make the account and just start posting, even if I was getting like 10, 15 likes on my first couple posts, I wouldn't be able to have the confidence to like keep going, keep growing, and then be where I'm at today. And I still have that like want to keep going and growing, etc. I think it is discouraging to think that you need this kind of equipment or this kind of like tool that is like marketed to you for growth, or it's something that's going to make you be better at what you do, but no one can do it how you do it. And I think no kind of tool or like special microphone or special paints or special outfit is going to, or like even like some special beat is going to make you famous or successful or happy in where you are. It's all you. Like I can do something great with like $5 Walmart paints versus like a super fancy paint set from Italy or something. Like the paints don't matter, it's your action that matters. And I think it's just about having the faith that if you just start, it's going to keep going.
I would just also add, you know, we're all paving our own ways. And you have the ability to do the same. And you also have the ability to, like, I know mentorship is a thing as well. So even if you're trying to follow the path of someone else, like create your own footsteps and know that your journey is yours. The only advice I have for anybody is to just do it. It's like Emmen was saying, like, just do it and know that the growth will come, and know that however you start won't be necessarily how you finish. And that's supposed to be the case.
And if I can say one thing, add one thing to this, it's don't be afraid of encountering horrible situations, because I promise you're going to need them so you can have greater experiences. Yes. You're going to need to have the bad to understand what the good is.
Yes, that's nice, sis. Especially like how you said you're gonna need it to have greater experiences. That is so true.
I think listen to your body as much as you can. So feel what it feels like when you create a certain type of work of art, what it's like to collaborate with certain people, how you feel when you've been in certain rooms, whether that's good or bad, heavy or light. And then listen to that, follow the path of what feels the most light and enriching and isn't just instantly gratifying, but feels fulfilling in kind of a long term way. Whenever I've listened to my body, it really hasn't led me astray. So as much as you can hone that voice and listening ear, I think you'll be happier for it.
Thank you. I have one more quick question for Misha. Misha, you recently got to work with Michelle Obama on her podcast. What was that like, and how did that happen?
It was very cool. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. It happened because I started my own podcast production house and I had been working with a lot of different people in the industry. So after I made a couple of shows for NPR, I felt like I wanted to create a work environment for people where they could own their own intellectual property, where representation was key, and where I had more creative control, and so did other artists who were working in audio. So I started my own production house in January of 2020, and a friend of mine had just been recruited by Higher Ground Audio. She was looking for production houses that felt mission aligned, and she came to us, and we ended up meeting with their team, and it felt like a very natural fit. So we started working on the podcast in February of 2020, had to take a short hiatus because of COVID. And then we're able to finish it and release it in July of 2020. Mrs. Obama is somebody who I think really embodies what it means to live with integrity, and even in the public eye. So I think that was something that I thought a lot about while working on that show, and have taken away from it as well.
Thank you. Last question for everybody. I love my creative side. You're all inspirational, and I really love making music, but I feel like it's always been a side endeavor for me. How do you make something you love your job? And how do you deal with the shame coming from our community around pursuing creative careers for all of you?
I'm ready to speak.
I feel like Aina Freyd is ready to go on this.
Yeah. I would say this. As far as the first part of the question, how do you make it your job? You start it as a side hustle. You start building it. That's what we did. We were doing full-time school and a lot of community work when we started doing Aina Freyd. And then as Aina Freyd started to pick up, we decided school wasn't the way. And we knew what we were doing. We had a clear path going with the support of our mom and our business ventures. And then we were doing our community work and our music. And as Aina Freyd got even more of a time-consuming job, we had to drop our community work on that end and put our community work within Aina Freyd. So it will grow. You don't want to drop it all to start something, but you want to start something. And then as the demands grow, you figure out what's the best way to alter your life to meet them. And it is blessings. Whatever it is, make sure it's your purpose, because there are blessed, like we talked about this the other day, there's a path for you, and it is blessed. It has everything you want in it, because the way that we chase in that way is blessed in that way. But you can't get to it if you're not on the right path. If you're on somebody else's path, if you're on a path that pleases chasing someone else's dream, doing what you want to do to please others, even if that's your mom, you need to please yourself. And when you do that, the blessings are there for you. For the next question about shame. Where do you see shame? Shame. Where do you see the shame? Like,
let me tell you this.
We are so,
sorry.
Let me just say this real quick. We are so sure in ourselves and so sure in what we're doing. We feel very confident about the route that we are taking. And it doesn't, us doing what we do does not make us feel worse about our faith.
That's why we say it better be your purpose.
Period.
Because when it's your purpose, you're not going to care about what anyone has to say.
Well, you get there.
You're living in what fulfills you, and you're living in what you're called to do. You know what I'm saying?
But I would say
this. You do have to gain confidence.
Yes, I would say, because some people need to gain the confidence.
But you gain confidence by living in your purpose.
Yeah.
By recognizing, when you truly recognize this is what I'm meant to do,
then you're truly, and you start living in it, whatever anyone else has to say will not matter to you.
And it can be anything. It can be making cups. It can be drawing on homes. It can be doing
Sidewalk art, whatever it is that is yours, take it and make it evolve. That's just, I hope that was helpful.
No, I think that's advice every single person listening to this could use. Every single person maybe in the world could use.
I think to add to that, the people who are throwing shade now when you're like small and struggling to figure it out and you're like building up your side hustle, the moment that you get an ounce of fame or any kind of attention, they're going to be the first people to own you. And they're going to be like, oh, that's my cousin, or oh, that's my friend, and start, associating themselves with you and asking for help. And just think about that moment and how good it's gonna feel whenever they are, the first to dismiss or criticize or judge you. And I can say from personal experience that happens a lot. So you can listen to it and let them get you down, or you can be like many of the prophets and messengers in Islam, like Hazrat Yusuf, who, even though his brothers were super cruel to him, he was like, no, I will give you grain when your turn comes and you've been blessed or given tons of opportunities. So that's been kind of my motto.
I'm in a position right now where my business is my side business still. When I was doing my master's, I put it away for a bit just because it was a lot for me to juggle, and I knew I really wanted to do my master's, so I dedicated the time for it. But now that I'm part-time here and in a job, and I'm part-time here with the freelancing. And for me, even though I'm building and trying to figure out what I want to do, I believe that kind of distance makes the heart grow fonder with my work. So I don't think it necessarily has to be a journey where you're trying to get to the other side by keeping it as a side hustle. I think you have to try to enjoy and learn from the experiences that you're encountering throughout your entire journey. Like I know for me, even though it's a side business, when I have the chance to do something, I want to run to do it. I want to like plow through and get it done and actually have enjoyment in it. Whereas I know at this point in my life, if I was doing illustration full time, I probably would get pretty frustrated with trying to meet other people's visions and not being able to portray the vision that I have. So, I mean, I guess I'm in a unique position because I'm still part-time here and part-time there. But I think every step of the journey that you have, whatever blessed path that you've chosen to start, you will have challenges, but it is about finding the enjoyment and finding the purpose in each phase that you go through.
Thank you. That's a really great note to end on. And that's all the time we have. So thank you so much to our speakers, Misha Yusuf, Emin Ahmed, Straingth and WiZdumb of Aina Freyd, and to all of our audience members and our co-sponsors. And then as a reminder, if you want to hear about similar events from the U of M Global Islamic Studies Center, including our upcoming chaplaincy events and our upcoming Black Islam events, sign up for our newsletter. Thank you all for attending.